Welcome, y'all, to this week's episode of Backstage. I am bringing you Chef Julian Rodarte of Beto and Son. And if you live anywhere around the Dallas area, you probably know Beto and Son. It is an absolutely incredible, the most incredible restaurant of the area. I think, personally, the best Mexican restaurant in all of the United States. And I've got the chef and co-founder here to give us a backstage glimpse into that journey and also into the journey of a chef from start to finish. So he goes all the way back to cooking in the kitchen with his dad, being put in the dish pit, I think it's called, and how he worked his way up through culinary school, through being a food scientist, to eventually ending up creating this incredible restaurant, Beto and Son, with his own father. And now, I forget how long he said it was, but years later, you can't get into this restaurant, y'all, without a wait time. I mean, I'm talking like hour and a half wait. So clearly, they have done an incredible job, not only with the cuisine that they offer, but the environment in which they offer it. They're all about God, food, and family. I think that really translates in this episode. So enjoy this talk with Chef Julian Rodarte, and go check out Beto and Son. You will not regret it. Hi, Chef Julian.
Hi, Pastor Jamie.
So good. Thank you for doing this. I'm so stoked.
Oh, thank you for having me on. I've been looking forward to this all week.
Oh my goodness, me too. I've wanted to have you on for a while now, I think, right?
I think we've been kind of going back and forth with scheduling and stuff, and obviously with the holidays, it doesn't make it any easier, especially when it comes to, busy restaurants and stuff. So
for sure. Well, I appreciate you doing it because, as we'll talk about, you have a restaurant and you're CEO of a lot of different things with wait times that are hours, and you still took the time to come on my podcast.
Man, I wouldn't have missed it. Like I said, I've been looking forward to this for a while, and I'm just so glad we finally were able to make a date work. So I'm excited.
Thank you. Well, let's start at the beginning. How do we all know each other? Do you want to tell the story?
Yeah. So when I was, kind of growing up, Jeff Smith he's a good buddy of mine, and he started attending the movement and, met Pastor Dustin. And I also grew up with the Mecklers. We were all kind of like homeschooled together, and, they started attending the movement. And I want to say this was about 10 years ago, because I was still in high school. And I know it's crazy. It is crazy to think about. And yeah, so that's kind of how it all started. And then obviously my sister Daniela, she is the one who really got involved in the church. She's my youngest sister. And as she started to kind of get to that high school age and college age, she really became involved and did the internship with you guys, and, just absolutely raves about everything that you guys are doing. And obviously my parents, attend there on Sundays. And so it's, I'm happy to say that I was the first to attend from the family. Yeah. But obviously my family has become, big active members, within the church. And that's kind of how we know each other.
That's so fun. A decade long now. That's so wild. It's so fitting to start this podcast. And for the listeners, you'll hear the story of Chef Julian, and him and his father started Beto and Son in Dallas, which is the most, we'll get to it, amazing. The most amazing Mexican restaurant. But I love that we have the God and food aspect.
Absolutely. No, it's the most important part. It's the most important part,
Yes, and just life around the table with people. Food is such a part of culture and family and love. And so we always see Jesus eating.
Absolutely. We see him eating, and we see him at parties with food too, so clearly food was important to him as well.
Food was, yes. And so I'm so excited to hear why food is so important to you, and how your passion, your and your dad's passion, translated into what is now one of the best Mexican restaurants in the country. I think it was actually dubbed that by something.
Yeah.
Right?
So when we first opened, Zagat named it. Oh man,
Zagat. Yep.
Yeah, it was top. Oh shoot. I really need to brush up
I
on
know
my
you were the
awards.
fan. Yeah, you need to. You need to
Yeah,
brush up on your
right.
awards.
So
They're not on your out on your desk right now.
I know. I think it was top. It was something less than 20, but it was like top 20 hottest new concepts in the United States. And then
Yes.
obviously with Beto and Son, I was able to get awarded 30 under 30 most innovative chefs in the United States. And then USA Today named us. I think it was top 10 Mexican restaurants.
Yes.
He was either in Dallas or Texas, one of the two. And so, yes, it's we have been very blessed with awards, as well as, you know, people enjoying our food the way we intended them to enjoy it.
Which I know you all, and so I know that's what you care about the most. You love people to love your food.
Yes, no, and it
heart of a
really, yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it's crazy because we always talk about Beto and Son. Really, you know, it opened in 2016, but it actually started way before that when me and my dad, you know, just being obviously, you know, I'm half Mexican on my dad's side, and then my mom is German Irish. So, but we very much have a Latin family dynamic in that we love having people over and cooking for them and feeding them. And so our entire lives and our family culture has been built around having people over to the house to cook and feed. And you know, Beto and Son was God's way of kind of expanding those boundaries and you know, getting a larger group of people in to be able to enjoy our food, you know, throughout the entire city and not just the people that we knew back in McKinney.
Yeah. Oh, I love that so much. Well, I do want to thank you as well for comping our meal a week and a half ago or so.
The least I can do. The least I can do. Just happy to have you and Dustin and see the boys. It's always a pleasure.
The boys love Beto and Son. And you know, they're the worst critics. They hate, they pretty much want cereal and waffles. And maybe on a good day pizza. But they love your quesadillas.
As long as there's something, that's awesome. I'm so glad to hear that they enjoy the quesadillas.
Oh yeah, and they don't like them everywhere. Not a fan of Torchies.
Well, hey, then that's even more of a reason right there. So that's awesome.
But yeah, you guys are so sweet. And we had been in their Order to Feast after one of the Dream Center events. And we left and they were like, well, you guys weren't even there because we were like, is Chef Julian here? Is Beto here? And somehow you still comped our meal. So you guys are so sweet to us. And I don't know if you remember, or Daniela for sure would probably, but when I got the first version of COVID.
Yes.
Back in March of 2020, you guys you sent, what's your water?
Essential water.
Essential water. Yeah, you sent like a 12-pack of like the big ones.
Yep.
And tons of food for the family. So I'm so grateful for you guys. I love your family.
I do remember that because I remember Daniela calling, and it was God's timing is perfect. And this is another one of those scenarios when it is. But during COVID, we at Beto and Son were doing a lot of just community work because look, obviously, you know, during COVID and shutdowns and all that kind of stuff, the community was in need. And, you know, we feel like, you know, God didn't just give us a restaurant to, you know, make money and cook food for people. He gave us he gave us basically means to, you know, and resources to share with the community. And so we were blessed that as we were doing different things for different people, we were basically saying, hey, if you were an industry individual that was laid off and you know, don't have money for food, like come to Beto's, we'll feed you. If, you know, we were making food for frontline workers at hospitals and firefighters around us at different fire stations and the police station. Wow. And people caught on to that. And Essentia Water saw what we were doing on social media and said, hey, we're going to ship you 100 pallets or 100 cases of essential water and just you give to those who you feel are in need. And it was right at that perfect timing where, I'm sorry that unfortunately you got COVID. But I remember we received those pallets and Daniela said, oh, you know, Pastor Jamie, she's sick with COVID. You know, we need to send, you know, some food and some water to the family. You know, we just got the pallets of Essentia. And so anyways, it's just, you know, God's timing and resources and all that kind of stuff aligning perfectly. But very, very thankful we were able to, you know, contribute in that time.
Yeah, I love the community focus that y'all have as well in it all. And I remember that during COVID, yeah. And you guys did you strangely kind of blow up during COVID?
We did.
Yeah, I kind of remember this. It was like the opposite story of most.
Yes, it really was. It really was, you know, and look, a lot of it was God, and a lot of it was having just great people around us. I had just gotten married. And so my wife she had this brilliant idea of, when everyone else is kind of posting on social media saying that, we're struggling, because every restaurant was struggling, and they were all posting, their struggles, and because they were real. But Alexa was like, I don't want to be just another restaurant posting their struggles. Like, there's so many people like struggling more than we are. So like, how can we be the brand that people support because of who we support, because of the reach that we have as a successful restaurant to, support others, whether it be other, industry related people in the restaurant industry, or just, those that aren't in our industry that are around our community. And it was a brilliant idea. And so we just went all in on how much could we give, how much could we give away, how much could we support others in a time that we were also in need. Just having the faith that, hey, if we're doing our job and supporting those around us and supporting the flock that God has given us, He will make sure that we have the resources to support ourselves. So we stepped out in faith, and man, did He show up big. We ended up needing to double our restaurant because of just the volume of people that were coming out supporting us, saying we want to make sure that Beto and Son makes it through COVID, and that Beto and Son is around, to see the end of the light at the end of the tunnel. And so we end up doubling our square footage because we needed more space, because the wait times that were high just kept getting higher and higher. And it was unfortunate that the restaurant next door to us closed, but it was very fortunate for us at Beto and Son, because we were said, hey, we talked to our partner / landlord, Phil Romano, and he was like, hey, if you need the space because you can't, get enough people in there, like, take it. Yeah. And it was literally overnight, we were doubling everything we had done before. And so during a post-COVID world, we're having our best years that we've ever had, well beyond what we could have ever imagined.
Isn't that just so God too? You just reap and sow. It's just a principle. And you're definitely sowing, because it's like an hour and a half wait list when we go on a Tuesday night.
We're very blessed in that way, that no matter what the night is, there's people that want to come in and eat Mexican food and eat chips and salsa and drink a good margarita. So, we're blessed in that way.
And get their tableside guac. Well, it's so funny. And I was telling Danielle, or actually maybe Dee was, but when we went a while ago, we just put our name in, and the boys went and played at the park across the,
the art park,
way. The art park, which you're CEO of as well. And so we just put our name in, got seated, and we just texted Daniela, and we're like, oh, we're here. She was like, why didn't you text me? I could have gotten you right in the door. And so I'm always like, no. But Dustin's like, oh, we're texting her next time.
Absolutely.
So we were there after the Dream Center like a while ago. I was like, text Daniela. We walked right in the door.
We always want our friends to be able to get right in. I mean, especially, look, you guys live so far away too that, whenever you guys are in the area, we always tell our friends, like, please let us know, we'll get you right in, or we'll do our best to kind of mitigate that wait time, because we do know that it's a nightly occurrence. So, when people come out to support, we want to make sure that we're able to get them in.
Oh, well, it's our go-to every single Dream Center event.
Oh man, I appreciate it. It means the world.
Oh my goodness. Well, we appreciate the fast entry.
Of course.
Okay, so let's get started with the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's the origin story? What drew you to cooking? What drew you to being a chef?
Yeah. So, it really, I think the origin story, as far as what drew me to being a chef really kind of starts with my dad. He grew up in Durango, Mexico, which is a northern state in Mexico. And he grew up at his grandmother's, kind of feet, just watching her cook. He grew up on a farm it's crazy. Actually, there was no running water, no electricity. It was just a little farm where they herded goats and grew vegetables like onions and peppers and just was fascinated by what she could do with what she had on that farm and how she could turn those incredible ingredients into, just delectable dishes, right? That farm to table lifestyle before it was a trend here in the United States. And so that is what inspired him. And likewise, maybe it's in my DNA or in my blood. I don't know, but I grew up, wanting to be in the kitchen with him. And that was the way that we bonded. That was the way that we spent time together. It was a lot less about me wanting to cook and me wanting to, be involved in the cooking practice. And just really, I just wanted to be with my dad. It just so happens that he was cooking and that was how I got to spend time with him. And so whether it was me telling him, hey, can you teach me how to cut an onion so I can help you cut onions next time? Or, tell me, how you want me to season this or throw it on the grill. I may not be able to do it all, but, how can I contribute, in the kitchen and just helping you and be your little sous chef, and so, it really, it started there. That's where I think my culinary journey began, was being a very, very young, kid, just wanting to spend time with my dad and also selfishly get the first bite of every meal, as being a always hungry growing boy. But that's the origin story of my, I guess, culinary career is spending time with him in there and just watching for years everything he did, asking him a million questions like all kids do. And, eventually realizing that it was something that I was very familiar with and something that I enjoyed. And so when I turned 14, my dad had a little taqueria in McKinney, and he, said, hey, I told him, I said, hey, I want to be a chef, thinking at 14 that it just worked that way. You tell a chef you want to be a chef, they call you a chef and you're good. That's not how it works at all. But, my little 14-year-old mind thought that's how it worked. And my dad just kind of laughed and he said, hey, I work hard in restaurants, so you don't have to, go be a doctor, go be a lawyer, go do something with your life, I wouldn't take no for an answer. I was like, no, Dad, I want to be like you. I want to be a chef. And so he was like, all right, well, here's an apron, dish pit's that way. And that's kind of how it all started. He sent you to the kitchen? Yeah, he sent me to the dish pit. It's the dish pit. Okay, yep. Yeah, to wash dishes. So I washed dishes for the night, and he was also like, oh, I'm gonna show him. He's definitely not gonna want to do this long term. So he made it hard. He was sending me all these dishes to wash, floors to clean, all the grunt work. And at the end of the night, he was like, so what do you think? You still want to be in restaurants? I was like, oh, Dad, I love it. Can I come back tomorrow?
Oh,
and he was
you
like,
loved it.
What have I done? I loved it. I loved it. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. Because there was so much. It was the camaraderie. When you're in a kitchen and when you're in a restaurant, there's so much going on. I always attribute it to a going to the symphony, or seeing an orchestra play. When you think about restaurants, and we kind of got into this a little bit, what you go to you touch so many different people before your dinner is through, before your dining experience is through.
Yes.
It starts with the host stand, right? And that communication of, is there a wait? And if there's a wait, how long is the wait? And is that an accurate wait time? And and what that experience is like. And then after that, you get sat, and the server comes to the table and then kind of walks you through that experience. And then they communicate the food and the concept. And, there's all these different pieces. The food has to be cooked correctly to the right temperature, done at the same time as every other dish that's going to that table. And so there's so many different facets of the industry and of the restaurant that has to be done perfectly well, perfectly timed. If I had to, kind of relate it even more, it's like the kitchen is the heart, or the percussion, and the orchestra, the bartenders are the brass, and the servers are the strings. And, everybody has their piece. And to me, the chef was always the conductor, who was making sure that everything happened at the right time, on the right note.
Yes.
Everything had to be in the same key, and the harmonies and the melodies, like everything had to be, going at the perfect time. And when it's going well, you can tell people enjoy it. You look at the dining room and everybody's laughing and having a great time, and you can see the face of what delicious food looks like, But just on this flip side, if it's not going well, you can definitely see on every diner's face as well. If it's off key or off rhythm, or it just doesn't sound right, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's just as obvious as when people are enjoying.
Okay. Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's what I love.
Chefs care about that.
100%.
Okay.
I mean, we are instant gratification people at our core. Okay. We love cooking for people because it's like, I put a plate in front of you, you either like it or you love it. And we live for that, that instant gratification of being told that something is delicious.
Oh, cool.
All of that. So yes, 100%. Like, as chefs, that's what we dream of, is to have a restaurant full of people loving the food, and a line out the door.
And a line out the door, which you've succeeded at both. That is so cool. So as a chef, like, do you do the cooking, or do you teach? Do you come up with the dishes?
It's definitely a combination. When we first
Okay.
opened Beto and Son, my dad was in the kitchen, every day. I would jump on the line depending on if it was a weekend and we, didn't have enough staff. I would jump on a station, whether it be the grill or
Okay.
tacos or saute. So it's a combination, and it really the restaurant will tell you or demand of you what it needs. And
Oh.
so nowadays, when it comes to Beto's, it's a well-oiled machine that
Uh-huh.
is staffed, and the crew that we have is amazing. A lot of them have been with us from the beginning,
Really?
and yeah, we've been
Oh.
very blessed with an amazing team, and we call it the Betos family,
Oh.
because they're very much adopted family members into not just our lives, but obviously our business and all that kind of stuff. So
Right.
it really depends. Like I said, when we first started, we were very much, my dad was prepping every morning. I was, jumping on whatever station. There was a couple times I would get back into the dish pit. So thank God
How
he put
old
me
were
through the
you?
ringer.
Right? How old were you at
Uh,
this
I,
point?
I was 23 when we opened Beto and Son.
Okay. Okay.
Yep,
So and
23.
the son is you, just for everybody to
Yes,
know. The son is
correct.
you, Beto is your dad. And so you
Yep.
started at 23, and so you're just helping.
Yeah, well, kind of. So, what I guess I'll kind of start with the
Yeah,
story
yeah.
of how it all came about.
Yes, please
So,
do.
when I was born, my dad was working, or had created a restaurant called Cozy Mel's with Phil Romano. This was down in San Antonio. So I
Okay.
was born in San Antonio,
Okay.
and my parents were actually living in California at the time. And Phil had given my dad a call because he had heard that, from one of my dad's culinary friends that we went to culinary school with. Phil had heard that he needed a Mexican chef, and this was the chef he needed to call. So Phil calls my dad, who's living in California, and says, "Hey, I want to open a Mexican restaurant in San Antonio."
Oh, wow.
And my dad's like, "Why would you bring sand to the ocean? Like, there's so many Mexican restaurants.
Huh.
Why does San Antonio need another one?"
Right.
And he's like, "No," he's like, I hear, you're a little different. You come from Mexico and you have your
Mm.
own, unique twist on Mexican food." And he's like, "Why don't you just come down and let me kind of show you what I'm doing?"
Hmm.
Well, at the time, Phil had just opened Macaroni Grill.
Oh, he's the
And
macaroni grill guy?
yeah,
Oh,
Romano's Macaroni Grill. That's Phil
oh,
Romano.
oh, no way. Oh, I did not know
Yeah,
this. Oh my gosh. Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So,
So
so
he
I
had
guess
just opened macaroni grill.
yeah, he had just opened Macaroni Grill, and I guess even a little more backstory. So Phil Romano, he did Rudy's Barbecue is his,
What?
Fuddruckers Burgers is his. Yeah, Romano's Macaroni Grill. I mean, yeah, Phil is a serial restaurateur, entrepreneur.
Okay.
Yeah, just knocked it out of the park so many times over and over and
Wow.
over
And
again.
he
Yeah,
wanted to now start specializing in Mexican food.
right, with my
Okay.
dad, exactly.
Okay. Wow.
And so yeah, so that's what I was born into.
Okay.
So Phil, who is my partner, who is also like kind of the creator of the Trinity Groves property from the
Okay.
standpoint of creating that restaurant
Right.
theme park, is what he calls it.
Oh,
Um,
that's
that
such a
is
good
that
description. It is like a restaurant theme park.
yeah,
I love
absolutely.
it.
So yeah, so that's, when I was born in, he was already partnering kind of with my dad. Now my
Okay.
dad, Cozy Mel's ended up getting sold to Brinker, who was like the Chili's,
Okay.
and On the Border and
Uh-huh.
Maggiano's.
Okay.
So they get sold to Brinker, and my dad ends up going on to Brinker, and Phil ends up going and doing other restaurants. So they kind
Okay.
of part ways,
Okay.
mutually, just saying,
Yeah.
"Hey, this was great. We did a great job. We
Yeah.
sold it to this huge group that wants to open 100 of these.
Right.
Great job, and hopefully we see each other again in the future." And so that's kind of how it all went down. Well, fast forward, after I'm born 23 years later, Phil Romano is starting Trinity Groves and calls my dad and says, "Hey, I hear you have a
Shut
son who
up.
graduated culinary school.
Shut
Yeah.
up.
I want to do another Mexican restaurant. Are you
What?
down?" Yeah, and so I'm working, for a large soups and sauce manufacturer, as kind of like a food scientist.
Okay.
We made like Panera bread, broccoli cheddar soup,
Oh, it's
or
great. Love it.
yeah, yeah. It was basically we manufactured soups and sauces on like the millions of pound scale, like per year, for all these big brands.
Okay, I want to stop you like
Um,
every sentence you say because I am okay. First, explains food scientist.
Yeah, so basically, a chef, is an individual who works in a restaurant, creating dishes, plate by plate, right? And
Okay.
sometimes, on large scale and
Yep.
like, big banquets or like in Vegas, the big
Yep.
buffets, right?
Yep.
Um, Food science is a little trickier because you're creating food in a large factory that very much looks like a giant kitchen,
Gotcha.
except instead of a stock pot that's 20 gallons, these stock pots are 1,000 gallons.
Oh, wow.
And you have to
This is like
basically
large
create
scale?
these. Oh, huge!
Yeah.
Absolutely,
Okay.
like millions of gallons, millions of
Oh, wow.
pounds of production per year in these giant, manufacturing kitchens, if you will.
Oh my gosh.
And so, rather than just having 5 or 6 cooks in the kitchen, we had over 100 staff members that were just dedicated to the cooking of these different items
Wow.
day in and day out. It was a 24-hour facility, 7 days a week. And that's all that we did was make all these different soups and sauces. So
And
chili's
did you have
queso.
like creative liberty with things?
I worked on a team that we
Okay.
we all did
But you
different
came up with
creative kind
it
of. Well, some of the items, yeah. Like,
as a
so
team.
for example, we did, yeah, as a team,
Yeah.
absolutely. So like, Payway comes in and says, "Hey, we want to do a new vinaigrette." One of the things that we worked on was a wasabi vinaigrette for one of their new seasonal salads,
Oh,
and we created it. We sent it to Payway. They loved it, and it ends up being a new menu item on their menu throughout the United States.
really?
So yeah, so basically, our thing was, we created these items that we would ship to different brands. They could literally open the bag and we make it fresh in our manufacturing facility. But then the whole science part is obviously with all the logistics, we have to be able to freeze it, make sure that there's no microbes or bacteria,
Right.
that it's going to be safe when it gets to the place, no matter
Right.
what kind of extreme temperatures it undergoes, hot or cold.
Hmm.
And so that's kind of the science behind it all, making sure the food that you eat in everywhere you go, maybe not made in that actual restaurant, is safe.
Right.
We made a lot of different things for Walmart as well, as far as food related items. So that's kind of the food science piece to it.
Interesting. And what you said you made which queso? Chili's queso?
Well, we didn't obviously create that, but Chili's having the thousands of locations that they have,
Right.
they don't make their queso in each and every individual
Gotcha.
restaurant.
Okay.
They purchase from
Okay,
us,
I'm
but we would
understanding.
then ship it throughout the entire United States.
Gotcha. Okay. The wasabi vinaigrette sounds great, by the way.
Yeah, it was one of my favorite. I'm a big wasabi
I
fan,
am
so that was one of my
too.
favorite
Oh wow, I'll
vinaigrettes.
have to
Yeah.
get that next time I'm at Payway. I haven't been for a while.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh my
I
gosh.
know, and I don't even know if they still have it. 'Cause This was 6 or
This
7 years ago, so it
okay.
might have phased off.
Okay.
I couldn't tell you. If it's
So
still there, I should probably go back and try it.
it's like it's your work of art. You got to make sure it's still on the on the menu.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, so your work you go to culinary school, which that's where
Hmm.
you learn how to just for the layperson, you learn how to cook, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Exactly.
And you
Learn
do you
how to
learn
cook. Learn how to be a chef and run a business,
okay,
and
so you learn all the
yeah,
aspects.
all the aspects, all the
Okay, and
aspects,
so it's not just one type of cuisine. It's like you learn everything from like sushi to
everything.
Italian to
Yep.
Mexican. Okay.
Uh huh.
Okay, so culinary schools cover all of it.
Yep.
Okay.
All of it. Well, a good culinary school does.
Yeah.
There's obviously culinary schools are like colleges, right?
Yep.
You've got your very small junior colleges, if you will, or community colleges, and then all the way up to the big time universities that actually have 4 to 6 year, master's programs.
Gotcha. Okay.
So yeah, the one I went to is called the Culinary Institute of America. It's one of the original culinary schools. The
Wow.
original is actually in Hyde Park, New York.
Oh,
I went to the location in San Antonio. My dad
okay.
actually did go to the one in Hyde Park, New York.
Wow.
But yeah, so so I went there, and then I kind of started making my way through the industry, working
Right.
in hotels at like the Ritz-Carlton, going and working for Denny's corporate, where we developed the new items for the entire nation. And
Okay.
then, like I said, going into food science, and then that's when Phil called my
Okay,
dad and
yes,
said, "Hey."
okay.
Yeah, so that gets
They
us
heard
back. Sorry, that
he
gets us
called
back
no, I
to.
love it. I love it. This is long form, so we have
It is, yeah.
you probably have things to do. I'm
No,
I'm
no,
here
no,
for as
no, no.
long as this is so fascinating because everybody goes to restaurants and nobody knows like sometimes what goes on behind the scenes, or
Absolutely.
back of the house, as we
Right.
say. Okay,
Absolutely.
so Phil, 23 years later, calls your dad
Yep.
and says, "I heard you have a son."
Yep, I heard you have a son. I heard he just graduated culinary school. I guess not heard because he knew I had a son.
Okay.
He was actually my first birthday party, but
Oh.
he's like, I
Oh.
heard your son just graduated,
Okay.
basically,
Yeah.
and he's like, yeah, he's working in the industry now, and he's like, I want to do another Mexican restaurant. Are you interested? And my dad was like, oh man, I don't know, restaurants,
Uh-huh.
they're hard work. He was working in kind of corporate America as a corporate chef for Chili's. And so,
Okay.
again, kind of going into another facet of the culinary industry is as a corporate chef, he would develop new items for Chili's on a national scale. So,
Okay.
if there was a new fajita or a new loaded queso or a new item, he would create the original recipe. He would then hand
Oh.
it off to the ops team, who would go and develop the training procedures throughout the United
Okay.
States to roll those new menu items out. Because obviously, with 1,000 restaurants, you have to have a pretty big team to
Oh,
roll out any kind of new item
I can't imagine.
that hits a
Right.
national menu. Yeah, so he was doing that, which is great because, like we were talking about earlier, in restaurants you're generally working weekends and holidays.
Right.
In corporate America, it's 9 to 5. Because at
Yeah.
the end of the day, you're not actually in a restaurant; you're
Right.
developing items for a
Right.
restaurant. So he was loving his life doing that because he got to do what he loved, but also be a family man at
Right.
the
Be a
same time.
dad and be a husband.
Yes,
Right. Right.
exactly. And so, he was like, man, do I really want to commit, to running this beast of an operation that we call
Mm.
restaurant? Um, and so he called me and he just said, hey, I just want to let you know, Phil called. And my ears perked up right away. And I was like, Phil? I was like, what'd he say? And he's
Oh.
like, well, he wants to do a Mexican restaurant. And I was like, and I'm assuming he wants us to do it. And he's like, well, that's what he said. He's like, but man, I don't know, restaurants, they're hard work. He's like, both of us are kind of on the corporate side. You really want to get back into restaurants? I was like, Dad, it's not a matter of do I want to or not. I'm like, we're doing it. This is what we're doing.
Oh. Oh.
And
So,
yeah,
so you
and
you
he was,
you
oh,
were the
God.
deciding factor for
I
your
mean,
dad.
there's a lot of there's a lot of factors. I will say yes. I think for him, I
Oh.
was definitely the deciding factor.
Oh.
Obviously, there's the big boss who's my mom, who really had to
Right.
give her stamp of approval.
Yeah.
And she saw it differently
Mhm.
because we had that Mexican restaurant Petra, like I said,
Yeah.
and unfortunately that did not go well. That was
Oh.
during 2008,
Yeah.
during the recession.
Yeah.
So coming off of that, because again, that was 2008. This is 2016. So only about 8 years of separation
Mm.
between those two restaurants.
Yeah.
And, my mom's going, hey, remember what happened last time?
Sure. Oh
It
yeah.
didn't end up so well,
Yep.
not to say that it couldn't happen well this time, but,
Right.
the last time we did a go at this, it didn't have the success that Cozy Mills had when I was born.
Mm.
Um, and it was very real. I remember having to quit sports to go
Mm.
work, and kind of my attempt at alleviating my financial burden on my parents,
Yeah.
because at the time, my dad had put a lot of pretty much all of his savings into this
Sure.
restaurant, and
Yeah.
now it's no longer a part of our
Mm.
lives, and he has to find another job. And thankfully he's
Yeah.
very blessed and very talented, and he was able to quickly. But
Right. But that's a lot on
she was just like,
a family. Yeah.
yeah, it's huge, absolutely.
Mhm.
It's a lot of a transition.
Mhm.
And so she was just like, hey, we have to be cognizant and aware of what all the scenarios are. And obviously I'm the
Mhm.
oldest, but there's two younger sisters that I have that would obviously equally be affected by a
Yep.
decision like this as well.
Yep.
And after a lot of praying and due diligence, we just were like, we're gonna go for it. We're gonna
Hmm.
this is what God's calling us to. This is our mission field.
Mhm.
This is who we are called to be and what we're called to do. And
Hmm.
everybody has their flock, and this is what we
This
feel is
is
ours.
yours.
So
Yes.
yeah, so we just felt like, hey, if we are responsible and at least go when God calls. Listen, at the end of
Yeah.
the day, success or failure in the world eyes, it won't matter, because at least we answered the call.
That's
And
so
so that's kind
good.
of how Beto and Son started.
That is so good. I mean, it's so applicable to almost anything in life, right? Like
Absolutely.
we can have a burn, or we can have a, what would seem quote unquote like a failure, when the whole time sometimes it's just preparation.
Right. Absolutely.
In God's hands it's always preparation, I guess. But
100%. 100%.
oh,
I I always feel like one of the most beautiful things in life is when God's timing and your preparation kind of align, and when
100,
when he
yes.
calls, and that beautiful moment of those two things colliding, that's a lot of times when breakthroughs happen.
It's so, so true. So you and your dad, you've always been close, obviously.
Yes.
So coming to work, but had you ever worked with him in like on a professional level, like post culinary school, up until Beto's?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So when he was with Chili's as a corporate chef and I was working as a food scientist, I would a lot of times do presentations for him. So we weren't necessarily working together.
Gotcha. But you were in the same, you're running the same circles.
Correct. Exactly.
That is, I love your dad and yours relationship being like at the core of the whole story. It's so sweet to me, especially because I have boys, and it's
100%.
And it's just like, oh my goodness, to have that kind of relationship with your father and want to follow his lead and want to start a restaurant with him. And I mean, this is totally off the food. I always go off topic, but what do you think your dad did that made you so much, like even you were talking about in your earliest days, like just want to be around him? Like for the fathers out there, because this is unfortunately not a story I hear a lot.
Yeah, no, it actually, it's a couple things. And this is what I think I'll start with is that my dad grew up without a father. So when he had me, he had this big kind of burning desire in his heart to be the father that he never had.
Wow.
And so when he grew up in Mexico, he grew up with his grandparents because his mom was a single mom. He was the youngest of three kids. He had an older brother and an older sister. And his mom was convinced that they needed a better life outside of Mexico in the States. So she made the very hard decision to leave her kids with her parents, my dad's grandparents, and basically, kind of create a life for them in the States. So from the time he was 2 to 12, he was living with his grandparents, not knowing who his mom or dad was. His dad had left before he was born, and was really only in his older sibling's life. But he, very much grew up without that father figure, seeing all of his cousins grow up with fathers and knowing that he was not the same as those individuals. And so when I was born, he had that big, burning desire in his heart to be a father because he knew what it felt like to not have one and to see individuals and, both family and friends that had fathers. And that I think was one of the things that really attributed to it because he was always trying to be involved in my life. He would constantly, be interested in the things that I was interested in. So if I wanted to play sports, then he was going to be the coach of the basketball team or soccer team. If I was interested in music, then he was going to find some, way to be involved as well. He was always, just trying to be my biggest supporter in any way, shape, or form. And when it came to, like I said, cooking, it was just something that I knew he did. And to me, chefs were superheroes. And so, naturally my dad was then a superhero. And so it was the combination of both him understanding that he had a job to do outside of just being a family provider. He had there was a father, title that he had to, embrace, and he did very, very, very well. But I think the other thing too is just that, growing up and thankfully having a household that was very tightly knit. I was homeschooled. My mom was my teacher, if you will, and
your mom's so cool.
My dad was my mentor. And it was just that was always kind of the understanding that these are the two closest people in your life, and there's the verse that, and this is the other thing too is. Scripture is so key to all of this, right? It's kind of the foundation that ties it all together, because when you think about the way that Scripture talks about mothers and fathers, if we read it and take that seriously, then we realize the value that they have, not just in our lives in the moment, but our futures. And when the Scripture specifically that talks about honoring your father and mother, and you'll live a long and blessed life. I was always taught to take promises like that seriously. Like that's not just in there to sound nice or because it has a nice ring to it.
Right.
Like
an empty platitude. Like you really took it seriously.
And yeah, yes, absolutely.
Hmm.
And thankfully, I feel like as the years go by and I look back, I'm like, man, I'm definitely reaping the benefits of what that promise that the Lord, very much
Yeah.
gave us, just because it took it seriously. So, anyways, I guess long-winded answer to say
I
that
love
he
that.
was a great father that took it seriously and realized that it wasn't just something that you wake up in the morning and just go about your day, but you actually have to be very intentional
Yes.
about what being a father is. And he was a
Yeah.
very intentional father. And, I just owe him the world, obviously.
Oh, I love that. Oh, that's so, so good. So good. Um, so when Beto and Son starts, who, let's get to some of the fun practicals now too. Like, how do you set a menu? Like, who came up with those tacos? Who came, you know what I mean? How do you do that? Was that you and your dad? Was that a team?
Yeah,
I want the
it's a
backstage of restaurant.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a combination, and our it was very collaboratory. A lot of my mindset was, my father's from Mexico, and a lot of his recipes come straight from Mexico. So there's nothing more, what's the word, organic or authentic,
Yes,
than an individual who lived the life, right? He was
totally.
living the farm to table lifestyle before that was a trend in the United States.
Before it was
He
cool.
was
He was, yeah,
Yes,
yeah, yeah.
he was living on a farm, and every day they would come to the table with the ingredients that they grew from that farm. They were living off the land.
Oh my
And
goodness.
um, like I said, I knew that he had that background that I did not have.
Yeah.
Growing up in McKinney, that was absolutely not
Right.
the lifestyle, right?
Right.
So I knew, I was like, listen, when it comes to the authenticity of the sauces and the way
Mm-hmm.
we cook some of the proteins and that kind of thing, I was like, that is 100% all you.
Yeah.
The one
Okay.
thing
Yeah.
that the one major thing that I can say that I contributed was understanding that we are in a millennial world.
Mm-hmm.
It is millennial driven as far as they are the ones with the dollars that are spending it right now.
Yep.
And we are in a social media world. And
Yep.
so the food, while needing to be authentic and organic from the standpoint of the cuisine, it also needed to be Insta worthy. It needed to be colorful. It
Mm.
needed to be fresh and
Yes.
vibrant.
Yes.
And so that is kind of where I said, listen, I need you to make this, this, and this. But for our enchiladas, for example, we don't roll any of our enchiladas. We stack them all.
What does that mean?
And
What
that
does that
was,
mean?
uh, so yeah,
Roll versus stack.
yeah. So generally when you go to a Mexican restaurant, you get the little round kind of rolled enchilada. So they take the corn tortilla, they stuff it, they roll it, and it becomes that long kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
cylinder shaped
Yeah.
enchilada. We don't roll ours. What we do is we put a tortilla down, we lay it flat,
Uh-huh.
and then we put cheese and meat and sauce, and then we put another one on top of that,
Oh.
like
Uh-huh.
you would a quesadilla, and
Right.
we
Right.
stack it up 3 layers high. And
Oh yeah, I've had
we
this. Yeah.
never yeah, we never roll it. We stack them all, and what it does is it gives us a better canvas. So then
Oh.
we have more surface area to garnish with stuff like watermelon radish and
Uh-huh.
avocados and pickled onions and just different
Okay.
items that create more of an Instagrammable piece to something that is something very comfort food. It's and nobody would say an enchilada is this culinary masterpiece from the standpoint
No.
of the
No.
gastronomy that goes into it,
Yeah, you can
right?
get it at a
Um,
drive-through. But
right,
your
right, exactly.
enchiladas are like, yeah,
But that was
a work of
and
art.
that's 100%
So
right. That
that
was
you
100%
brought
the
that.
yes. It was we need to take everything that we've grown up with,
Yes.
and how do we reimagine it for the millennial eye that when they come here they go,
Wow.
I know what an enchilada is, and they order it and they go, oh, I've never seen one like this before.
Oh,
Like this is unique. This
I
is
love
different.
that. Yes.
The liquid nitrogen margarita is another
Okay,
perfect
I was
example.
gonna
We
ask you about this. Okay, we gotta
okay, yeah.
stop. We gotta pull the car over. You have to explain this phenomenon. The first time we walked in, like years ago, there was just smoke everywhere, all over the restaurant.
Yep.
We had no idea what was going on. Explain the genesis of the what is it? Nitro?
Yeah, the liquid nitrogen
The
margarita.
liquid nitrogen margarita. Okay, yes, tell this story.
Yeah, so this is it's a combination of again going to what we were talking about being millennial driven as far as the way that the experience is,
Yeah.
and taking items that are familiar,
Mm-hmm.
but reimagining the experience of that
Yes.
familiar food or drink. But then it also goes back to my food science background as well.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding molecular gastronomy and how it pertains to restaurants and
Mm.
experiences that one can have in a restaurant. My dad always taught me. He had a saying. He said, the his favorite thing to do was take very peasant-like things and elevate them, or take things that
Mm.
people experience in fine dining, Michelin star
Right.
restaurants that the 1% enjoys, and then bringing them down to the masses in a way
Oh, I
that
love
anyone can
that.
enjoy. And so taking that same mindset,
That's
it was
so
like, hey,
beautiful. Yeah.
I worked at a place where we made liquid nitrogen ice cream tableside, and I thought, man,
Oh.
this is so cool. What else can I do with this? And I just kind of played around, and I found I could freeze alcohol within the ice cream that I was doing. And so I was like, man, you know what I need to do is when we got the opportunity to do a Mexican restaurant, I was like, I wonder if I can freeze tequila and make a margarita
Oh man.
doing it. And the science behind it is that whenever you make a margarita, right? If you're making
Mm-hmm.
it in a blender, you have to add ice, or if you make it in a frozen machine, you have to add water. At some
Mm.
point, there's got to be some kind of dilution between the
Okay.
ice or the water that actually does the freezing, because the
Right.
alcohol doesn't freeze unless it's negative 115 degrees, which
Oh wow.
no cooler or freezer is going to
Can
freeze that
do.
low.
Right.
Right. The unique thing about liquid nitrogen is it's negative 300
Oh
degrees.
my
So it is
gosh.
actually twice as cold as it needs to be to freeze alcohol. So you could literally freeze alcohol into an ice cube with liquid nitrogen. And that's the fun part, because then when you take the ice or the water out of it and you just add the lime juice, the agave, the orange liqueur, and the tequila, the four ingredients to make a margarita, you now have something that is more pure,
Huh.
more refined. And as it melts, one of the things people hate about frozen margaritas, when it melts, the water is what melts, and it waters it down. Well, with
Oh,
ours, because
it's
there's no
not
water,
watered
it's
down.
not watered down. As it melts, the flavor stays the same throughout the entire
Oh.
experience. So now it's not just a showpiece, which it is. I mean,
It's
it's
a
obviously
quality
a great
piece too, though.
showpiece.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We've enhanced, the frozen margarita that people are accustomed to, in that way. And
That's
so
so
that was kind of
great.
where the idea stemmed from, was just how
Okay.
do we create this showstopper that
Right.
everybody has a margarita, but how do we do something that's unique to us?
Right. Did you patent this?
Unfortunately, so
Oh.
I wish you could patent
Oh,
food, but
you
unfortunately, kind of like,
can't.
yeah, like
Shoot.
guacamole, right? Like,
Oh,
it's like no one can own the guacamole
guacamole.
recipe, right? Yeah.
Right, right.
Or even, like a margarita. Unfortunately, you can't own, like the margarita.
Right.
But you can trademark names. The problem is that our name is too generic, in that it's liquid nitrogen and then margarita. Like, those are two things that are not necessarily
Not
trademarkable,
specific enough.
because
Okay. Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
it's not like Mi Cocina has the Mambo Taxi. Well, what
Oh,
was it?
okay.
Nobody knew what a Mambo
Right.
Taxi was until they created it, right?
Okay.
Unfortunately, like liquid nitrogen, people know what that is. A margarita, people know what that is. So
Right.
we're taking
Okay.
two things, putting them together, and they're like, yeah, those are two descriptors. Those are not two like name things that you can own and trademark, if you will.
Okay. Okay. Well, it's always my boys love the smoke. They're always so shocked that it's not hot or smelly,
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
they love walking
Yeah,
through the
yeah,
restaurant and all of the table side
yeah.
liquid
Liquid nitrogen margaritas.
nitrogen
Yeah.
margaritas are going, and they dance around in them, and it's so unique. That is so fun. Okay, what would you say is like your signature dish?
Ooh, that is hard. I say it's hard because it's like, which kid is your favorite, or which one do you
Yeah.
do you love the most?
It
It's like, I
depends
love
on
them
it
all.
depends on the day, right?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I think there's a couple that stand out. And it's
Are these all
more,
on the menu?
yes,
Okay, okay.
yes. So the one that has stood out a lot because of Food Network is our carnitas noodle bowl. So the carnitas noodle
Oh, I have
bowl
not tried this.
was,
What? I
yeah.
haven't
So
gotten this
so
one yet.
yeah, so noodle bowls. It's funny because growing up, my dad ate this dish called fideo, which is basically, it comes from the Spanish.
Uh-huh.
So obviously, Spain, conquered, Mexico, and
Right.
they owned Mexico for a while. They bring their food and their artistry and all that kind of
Right.
stuff,
Right.
and then they sell Mexico to the French. The French bring their food and their culture, and then eventually, obviously, Mexico gains its independence. But in the process of that, there's so many different European kind of cuisines that have been left in Mexico Mexico that
Oh.
have their own kind of Hispanic, and Mexican origin.
Oh, cool.
Fideo being one of them. So
Oh.
fideo is a pasta that is toasted, either fried in a pan or toasted in the oven,
Oh.
and then cooked in a chicken broth.
Oh, wow.
And so my dad grew up eating this because it was a very cheap, kind of easy, starchy meal growing up, where his grandmother would basically fry up some noodles in a pan. They would take some chickens and some veggies. They would throw it all in. It was kind of a little one pot meal with pasta, chicken, veggies, and broth and all that kind of stuff. Well, as we were thinking through these items that he grew up with, I was like, man, bowls and noodles are very much a millennial thing.
Oh,
like,
big time.
we put everything in bowls and mix it all up together.
Right.
That's what we love, right?
Right.
So I was like, let's take authentic ingredients, authentic, sauces and different cooking procedures, and make something that is unique in that no one has experienced fideo in this way.
Cool.
And so that's where the noodle bowl comes from. And Food Network kind of saw it and we're like, hey, we'd love for you to compete on Beat Bobby Flay with this bowl.
Oh my gosh.
And so it was a lot of fun because actually it was a dream of my dad's to be on that show, and we actually got to be on it together because the format of the show is that two people face off against each other and the winner gets to go against Bobby Flay. So it was me and my dad against each other.
Oh, no
naturally
way.
he beats me. Yeah. And I'm sorry, spoilers. But then he goes up against Bobby Flay, and I won't spoil that. I guess they'll have the listeners will have to watch to see what happens with Bobby and my dad.
Oh, that's so fun.
But that was the dish that he competed against Bobby with. And so that one has gotten a lot of attention because it's actually been one of the most run kind of like episodes on Beat Bobby Flay. So it runs all the time. We get all these text messages randomly like, I just saw you on Food Network. I'm like, oh, the episode ran again. So that's definitely
I'm good. I'm so going to go find that.
Yeah, that's an iconic item. The show, I want to say, the episode was called Family Matters, and it was obviously on Beat Bobby Flay.
Oh, how fun.
But yeah, so I'd say that noodle bowl, the ceviche tower is a big one. Obviously, tableside guacamole.
Yes.
And then Instagrammable wise, it's not a dish, but the liquid nitrogen margarita obviously is definitely kind of. People always they're like, oh, when they ask, like, oh, we're rushing workout, I'm like, Beto and Son, and they're like, wait, is that the place with the margarita? I'm like, yes, it's the place with the margarita. But I know exactly what they're talking about.
It's so cool. Like, even that noodle bowl, it's like what you were saying, your dad's philosophy is on like taking simple things, making them Michelin, taking Michelin and making them simple.
Right. Exactly.
That's just too cool. That is amazing. Okay, so what is personally your favorite dish to prepare? If you were like,
ooh,
like what's fun? Like what's super fun?
Yeah, it
doesn't even have to be a Beto.
Okay.
Dish.
If it doesn't have to be, if it doesn't
if you
have
had
to be a
one
Beto
last dish to make on this earth, what would you have the most fun making?
So it's funny because when you're a chef, like you think of all these crazy things like liquid nitrogen margaritas and stuff like that, right? Like you think of all these crazy stuff, and so what's funny is if somebody was like, "What would be the last meal you would make?" It's so simple. I would just make fresh pasta with tomato sauce and meatballs. Like,
really?
I don't know what it is about that dish, but it's like. It's 3 items. It's pasta, it's meatballs, it's tomato sauce. Like there's really not much more to that.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's those simple things. Like there's the saying that like, we as chefs, create these recipes, but at the end of the day, God's recipes was the tomato, and you can't improve that. We're always, we're always looking for ways to improve, different recipes. But at the end of the day, God's recipes were tomatoes and apples and grapes and the things that, grow in this world or whatever. And you can't improve upon those things. Right. So sometimes it's taking just what the recipes that the Lord made, like the tomato, and keeping it at its simplest, and taking wheat and making pasta with water and olive oil. And I mean, just the simple things. So I think it's kind of weird, but like, in restaurants, we focus on how do we, go crazy with these different, dishes and recipes. But like, I think for me as a chef, just when it comes to what I want to enjoy, it generally ends up being the most simplest things. Cause I think we spend so much time making complexity that sometimes it's nice to just have those comforty, homey, type dishes. And for whatever reason, it was just something as a kid, growing up, my dad, we would be in the kitchen making fresh pasta and meatballs and tomato sauce together. And so anyways, that I think
I love that.
is what it would be.
You can't improve on a tomato. That is just so beautiful.
Yeah. I'm telling you, God is undefeated when it comes to recipes.
Oh, but yet we will try our hardest to improve upon him.
Yeah,
and it doesn't our entire conversation applies to all things in life, right? We will always try and improve on God, right?
Yes.
But at the end of the day, it just always comes back to the few simple things. Oh, that's so beautiful. Mm-hmm. Okay, so in closing, a couple things. Kitchen tools.
Yeah.
What are your go-to? What's the one you would need? Like, if you only could use one tool in the kitchen, what would you use? Or what would you keep?
Ooh. Okay. Wow. Ooh, that one, that's a good one. That's a really, really, really good one.
I think I just figured out mine. I love that I'm acting like I'm a cook to you right now.
No.
I was thinking the other day, I was like, if I had one tool that I could have, I would take, I don't even know the official name. It's like the tongs.
Okay, yeah.
Right, because Dustin loves steak, right? And so we do a lot of 100%. Tongs. So I'm like, I use those tongs so much, like.
Yeah.
So that's what made me think of it, like.
Absolutely. Well, I think if we're talking like unique to utensils and that kind of thing, and I would say, I guess, steak knife. I mean, or not steak knife, but a chef's knife.
Chef's knife.
Because because everything requires some sort of fabrication, whether it be vegetables or even proteins, right?
Yep.
So a good chef knife. I mean, I'll use chopsticks if I have to for tongs, I'll figure something out, like when it comes to
you
that.
Need this chef's
knife. A sharp knife is one of, I think, as a chef, kind of for me, one of the most important things. It's like, not only one of the most important, I think sometimes one of the most undervalued, just because, there's knives everywhere, but a sharp knife, it's definitely important. So I think, I hope that isn't too much of a cop out.
No, I love it. I love it. Do you spend serious money on your knives?
I do.
Yeah, I do this with my Bibles. Yeah. I do that with my Bibles. Yeah. And I've spent more on my current Bible. I've spent more on than any clothing item I have ever bought.
Okay. Wow.
It's the same with chefs now, right?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. No, I mean, we spend more on chef knives than we do on our uniforms, or chef coats that we wear, or our chef shoes, or any of those items. I mean, if it was up to us, we'd have a knife for every different vegetable in the refrigerator.
Really? Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's too fun. Okay, a couple things in closing. Chefs you admire. Who did you other than your dad? What did you grow up, or currently is there anybody that you're like, oh, they're on it?
Yeah, I've got a couple great chef mentors that I admire and that I've really tried to emulate throughout the years. One of them is Dean Faring, another Dallas chef.
Okay.
I worked for him when I was at the Ritz-Carlton at his restaurant Faring's, and one of the things that I loved about him is, I mean, he is arguably Dallas's biggest celebrity chef, in that he's written so many cookbooks, he's been on so many different shows and had his own shows on TV, and he is just one of the most genuinely nice, kind, and humble individuals. I remember just being an intern in his kitchen, and he would ask me hey, he'd call me Big J. He always had a nickname for everybody, and he's like, hey, Big J, what would you do with this? What would you do with that? And it's like, to have a celebrity chef ask an intern, who's just getting started in the kitchen, what they think about his recipes.
Right.
It was just always something that really spoke volumes to me, in that, never feel like you're too big to ask, one of your crew, what they think or how they would improve upon something that you've created.
So good.
And just also having, that security in yourself, that you have no problem asking anyone, how they can improve upon who you are and what you've done. And so I would say Dean Faring is a big kind of mentor to me, just in the way he not even just what he said, but just the way he handles and operates. Highly can't speak highly enough about him as a chef.
I love that. That's
and
great.
yeah, I think that's number one. I mean, I could go on and on about different chefs that have obviously impacted me, but I don't know that we have another hour just to discuss that. So anyways, that's my number one right there. We'll stop with that one.
That's amazing. What's one of his restaurants in Dallas?
So Fairings is kind of self-titled restaurant. It's called Fairings.
Is that downtown? That's not the one underneath ground, is it?
No, that one's Dakota's. So Fairings is at the Ritz-Carlton, off kind of like on the corner of McKinney and Olive, I believe.
Yep. Okay. Oh, fun.
Right,
okay, I'm going to put that one on the list. From that, it's across the street from the 2-story Del Frisco's grill. Yes. Yeah, we love Del Frisco's too. Okay. That is so fun. Okay. Well, Chef Julian, thank you. This has been too good. This has just been.
Oh, thank you.
I have loved chatting. I love talking to people. First of all, the backstage glimpse I love. And then I love talking to people who are just passionate about what they do. And I always talk about, I don't know, you might be too young to remember. Do you remember the Crocodile Hunter?
Oh, I love the Crocodile Hunter.
No way.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
So I don't like animals. I don't care about zoos. I definitely don't care about crocodiles, right? But I always use this as the example of like how passion transfers, right?
Yes,
and
100%.
He loved these crocodiles, right? And the zoo and the animals, and he was just so passionate. I started being like, maybe I do like crocodiles. Maybe I would like to have a crocodile. Maybe, right? Because passion is caught. And so I'm just so grateful for you like coming on and doing this. I love this story about you and your dad. And I just think it speaks to so many things like passion, years of hard work, putting in the time, God's blessing on top of it, and generations working together. And
Absolutely.
I don't think without your dad, you would probably be in the position you are, and he wouldn't be in the position he is without you. And that is just such a beautiful picture that we don't see a lot these days.
Agreed.
And
I 100%
thank you
agree.
for emulating it, and thank you for coming on here.
Oh, thank you for having me. Thank you for taking the time. Really appreciate you giving me a platform to share my story.
Oh my goodness.
It really means the world.
We'll be at Beto right after the next Dream Center event, for sure.
Sounds great. Look forward to having you. I'll see you there.
Thank you.